All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to give the attendees one more minute, I'd say 1 or 2 minutes to join. It looks like we have quite a few joining in now. We're really excited to be with you guys today. Everyone can see my screen. So many exciting names on this list, Brian.
Great. Good.
Okay, well, as everybody is starting to join in, I'll go ahead and do a brief introduction. My name is Taylor Berry with Key Data Dashboard. I'm excited to be going over a global state of the travel industry with Brian Boyce here from HomeToGo. I personally have been in the industry about 8 years, which I don't think is as long as you, Brian, but I know I was just telling you how excited I am to be doing a webinar with you since I've been in this space. You know, I've watched you in a lot of webinars and presentations, and so it's a cool full circle moment for me from being on the property management side.
Well, that's great. I definitely have a lot to learn from you still. So I'm glad I'm doing it with a real pro.
Well, I'm excited to do it. What we're going to do is Brian's going to start with some HomeToGo travel trends and data, and then I'm going to get into some occupancy and daily rates and looking at those key performance indicators that if you're familiar with key data, you've seen quite a bit. So Brian, if you want to go ahead and get started, we'll start from there.
Awesome. Great, Taylor, and thanks for the introduction. It's really exciting to be here and exciting to see so much interest in data. That's obviously, that's always been an exciting thing for property managers to, hear about and think about. I think we've got an interesting presentation for you that sort of combines that data into some macro stuff too, so you can look at it from a high level and then get down to sort of the micro level of, hey, what is the data sort of showing us? So again, thank you, Taylor, for inviting us to participate in this. We really appreciate it. Again, I'm Brian Boyce. I'm with HomeToGo. I've been in the industry since about 2006. Before that, I was actually working with property managers in the travel industry. So I have a long experience working with property managers worldwide and sort of know your sort of troubles and the things that you guys go through on a daily basis. So we'll try to talk a little bit about those as we go along. So we'll start off with a little bit, as I mentioned, of information from HomeToGo. And then I'll hand it over to Taylor where we can get into some of the sort of deeper dives into the actual data. So HomeToGo is not a super new company. We've been around since 2014. By the way, I'm going to show a couple of slides here. They're kind of a commercial to give you a little update and a reminder of who HomeToGo is, but we'll be spending the majority of our time on actual trends and data and things like that. But HomeToGo has been around since 2014. We are based in Berlin, Germany. We are a fairly large online travel agency. If you're in the United States, you may not have heard about us. We're fairly large in Europe. We work with a lot of property managers in Europe and service a ton of travelers coming from Europe to other destinations in Europe and elsewhere around the world. And we are just getting started. So we're really excited about the future. We're really excited about the present. And then, delivering on this message of making incredible homes easily accessible to everybody. We are and do work in a very fragmented industry. I don't know if we really see it as much here in the US because we've got sort of these dominant players that sort of suck up a lot of our attention. I know I was with Vrbo and Expedia for years. Vrbo really cornered the market on, sort of that kind of listings, vacation rental idea. And then we're forced to change through some innovation from Airbnb and Booking.com to get more with the times to offer online bookings and things like that. That's worked really well in the US and in other markets, but we still have a ton of inventory that doesn't fit neatly into these different models. And that's where HomeToGo comes in. We also really service the European community. We're, hate to say it, I sound like a US band, but we're really big in Europe. And we work with a ton of property managers over there. And furnish a lot of their indirect listings. So when you're thinking about places to list your properties on, HomeToGo should be in your decision set. Making a decision, finding a vacation rental, booking it, all of those things, whether it's a sort of an apartment situation, condo, or it's a full home, it's not an easy task. And it's particularly not an easy task when you're a property manager trying to distribute your inventory and keep it up to date on a variety of different websites. And so that's where we can really help you, and we can get you some good new bookings. For travelers, as I mentioned, we want to be that place that they think of when they go and find their perfect place to stay, whether they're someone from France going to Croatia, or a U.S. resident staying here in the U.S. We've got a lot of really interesting, cool technology that we've built over the years that allows us to showcase the best of the world's vacation rentals, no matter where they are, and no matter what kind of vacation rental experience the guests might want to have. We've also built some really smart tools on top of machine learning to help highlight the bookability of the homes that we offer, and all the great things that you guys do as property managers. And that's really where sort of our rubber meets the road, so to speak, in terms of offering something that property managers are excited about and something that works for them. That's really what has helped us grow over the last few years as fast as we have. And we do, yes, have trusted checkout and payments, along with most other websites out there. But for us, if you're a property manager, you guys lead the guest experience and communication. We're not like some other OTAs where we restrict you from being able to market to these guests or communicate to them before, during, or after their stay. We allow you to do that. We also allow you to set your own cancellation policies. I worked through all of this at Vrbo and Expedia the years that I was there, working with cross teams, trying to figure out how do we tackle 6,000 different cancellation policies throughout the ecosystem. HomeToGo has done an excellent job of allowing for that, and making it clear to travelers that your cancellation policy is your cancellation policy. And then obviously, as a partner, you are the merchant of record, and so you charge the guest credit card or take payment however you'd like. The most important thing, I think, to all this is I've seen online travel agencies and listing sites come and go in my almost 20 years experience here in the industry. We are giving you something different, and that is actual guests that are making actual bookings that are good amounts and good guest groups that you want to book. So these are not 1 or 2 night stays. These are folks coming with a group, typically, over 35, 40 years of age. These are high spenders, and they're wanting to, have a great experience. And that's exactly where property managers, I think, can fulfill that perfect niche that we need in our industry filled. So we work with a lot of different property management systems. We integrate with dozens of different systems that are out there, all the biggest and the best in the US and in Europe. We work with them and work with the systems that you've got. Signing up and distributing your properties onto our website is a breeze. You simply fill out a connection form. You activate your properties in your software's distribution area, whether that's your channel manager or your actual PMS software. And then we get you live within a couple of weeks and start getting you bookings. So it's a very simple, straightforward process. Right now, if you're not a property manager, we're not really onboarding you. We're only working with professional property managers. So another great reason to sort of list and connect with HomeToGo. And here's some quotes from a lot of great partners that we've got. We've seen over the years the biggest property managers who have the most inventory really get it and list with us. And they are, in some ways, dominating their markets. I'd love to see more sort of smaller, medium-sized property managers list with us as well. We've got a lot of, great demand. But again, here's some great quotes from some of the biggest property managers in the world, with thousands and thousands of units under inventory. So I think if we can help make these guys happy, we can certainly make you and your team happy as well. So if you're interested, contact me after the webinar, shoot me an email, look me up on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find, and we'd be more than happy to connect you with one of our reps and get you started as soon as possible. All right, enough about the enough about the commercial. Let's switch gears to talk about early, and I emphasize early because it still is early February, market forecast and travel trends for 2023. And I've got a couple. And then I've also got some sort of tips and tricks on how to maximize your listings, whether you're listing with HomeToGo, or other websites. All right, so let's talk about trend number one. So trend number one that we are seeing across the board is a big explosion in terms of the number of people that are using our trip planning functionality to try to plan their trip. No surprise, finding and booking a vacation rental is difficult, but it's even more difficult when you have a group of family and friends that you're trying to sort of convince or talk through, hey, what options are the best for us? And that's where our wish lists come in. And we've seen a huge increase in the number of people that are using these wish lists to plan their trips. Again, regardless of where they're coming from. So in this way, more travelers are able to sort of share these lists as vision boards, and then they can kind of dial in where and when they want to go. So that's really good news because, we think of these vacation rental, sort of bookings as, one person, one booking, when in reality, in many cases, you've got, a good handful of people that are all coming together, and we need to be collecting all of their email addresses. We need to be marketing to all of those people, and that's where these tools can really come in. And it's why companies like HomeToGo continue to invest in building things like wish boards and wish lists and trip boards and things like that. So this is a great travel trend that we're seeing continue to escalate, and I'm excited to see what happens about this functionality as we go forward in time, and see even better, cooler use cases and more robust functionality that allows people an easier time to actually book their family and group trip. The new number two travel trend, which is not super surprising, but I guess it is to me, is that people are really planning trips to visit these sites of their favorite movies and TV shows. And that's happening. And it's happening more and more now than ever. I mean, we've been watching TV and movies for years, and I know people sort of get inspired by these things, but we can actually start to really see it. So for us, that has shown its face in data around things like searches in Sicily. And we saw a massive spike after the end of White Lotus season 2, or even during White Lotus season 2. People were actually looking for places to stay in this particular market. The same is true for destinations in Portugal and Spain, with another HBO show spinoff from Game of Thrones called House of the Dragon. So we're seeing more and more interest in going to these places that people are watching on TV and dreaming about. And I think that's just going to escalate. We've also seen, and we don't have it on here, but we've also seen a little bit of a dip in terms of sort of the primary destinations, because people are in some cases getting priced out of those markets and then deciding, you know what, why don't we try to go to Sicily because we really liked White Lotus, and boy, that looks great, and let's see if we can find a place. So a little different than White Lotus season 1, where it literally was just the Four Seasons Hotel in Maui, and for $2,000 a night, you're gonna sort of limit the number of people that actually go to that destination. But in a place like Sicily, hey, let's get a vacation rental. Let's go. Let's stay in a small hotel or a boutique or something. So that's really cool. And the third trend that we're seeing is a rise in spring shoulder season booking. So we knew this obviously happened during COVID, but we are starting to see it in our numbers as well, even beyond sort of the COVID sort of lockdowns. So we're starting to see global searches go up for the spring. That's really good news. We always see global searches go up for times like the summer, when kids are out of school, or bank holidays or things like that in Europe. But in our case, we're starting to see these global searches happen for spring stays. So that's really good news. And a lot of our travelers are looking to go international. We've got a fairly large number of folks that are looking to get out. Now, that's no surprise because one of our largest markets is Europe. and many Europeans were locked down for a while. And so, when they've got enough money or they've got enough time, they don't want to stay in their country. They want to go someplace else. And so we've got a great selection of vacation rentals for people to go and visit around the world. So this is also a really good trend. It means that in many of our destinations, we're able to sort of expand out the booking season and the stay season, which is really good for a lot of our destinations that are very sort of compressed in terms of the calendar that they have and the bookings that they have. So that's really cool. A couple of things to improve your listings. I've got a couple here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Taylor. One, be flexible with your listings. We have tried to coach property managers on this for a number of years, and you're going to see it out of the other OTAs as well. But we can tell and we can start to see how many searches are being done for properties. And if you've got a 7-night stay, that might be fine for your high seasons, but consider relaxing that, because we do have quite a few travelers that are trying to come and stay for 6 nights, things like that. So you may want to be talking to companies like us to try to figure out, hey, would that get me more bookings? Another one that you can do, and I've seen property managers toy around with this for a while, is try to promote longer stays with discounts. I know that's easier said than done, but there is a rising interest level in the number of guests that want to come and stay for 4+ weeks. And when you just offer your nightly rate or your weekly rate times whatever, that's going to be prohibitively expensive for them, and they won't stay. And so if you have some properties that you're willing to, sort of offer a discount to, go for it, do it. I think you'll see that you can get some good some good guests that can fill up your properties and come back year after year. Obviously, trying to attract locals with last-minute weekend stays to fill up gaps in your calendar is a great idea. There are software systems now that are doing that for you, so you can start to set some rules. If you don't have software that does that, then I would highly consider going out and working with a provider like Price Labs or Beyond Pricing or Wheelhouse or one of those vendors to allow you to do dynamic pricing and use data to stay competitive and to build your pricing based on supply and demand, and not just sort of what you think about before the season starts and then don't do anything with until after the season ends. And so, doing that is going to really help you get more bookings and get happier guests and owners. The last one, which I think is probably the biggest, is really think through your listing. So you've got a couple of things. You've got the ability to showcase pictures. You've got, description, which in many cases can be very long. And then you've got amenities, and so those are the sort of structured things that you say, yes, we have a grill on the patio. Yes, we have a hot tub that is private. Those things I think property managers tend to do really well, but where we sometimes don't fulfill exactly what the guest needs is in these long descriptions and in these photos. Those things can really help online travel agencies like HomeToGo or Airbnb or Vrbo help you get the guest. You'd be just shocked at the number of, well, you wouldn't because you're a property manager, but the kinds of questions that we get are just all over the place when people are emailing and calling and saying, hey, I have a question. Hey, before I book this, can I ask you something? The more information you have in your description, or even using photos to showcase some of this stuff, the better, because then we don't have to get those calls. The other OTAs don't get those calls, and the guest is confident enough to have the information they need to book the property right then. And so, one of the assignments that we've got here at HomeToGo is everybody needs to sit on customer calls, both on the property manager side and on the traveler side, to hear what people are asking about. And when I had to do this, the questions that were asked were clearly things that were things that property managers could post on their long description in their software and have that flow into their listing on a website like HomeToGo. So the more you can really thoughtfully think through what questions are people going to ask, and can we stick those answers or bullet points about the most commonly asked things in our description. That will help your conversion rate, and you'll get more bookings, and you'll beat out everybody else. So I've got some mentions over there on the right of different things that you can do. This is probably secondary, beyond sort of the typical things that people might ask. So if you say something like you've got a seasonal hot tub, that's a common hot tub that's available seasonally, tell me what that season is. Otherwise, I have to email or call to wonder, or go to your website, and that's a mess. So, that's a great way to actually increase your conversion. And then plan ahead. We have a large booking window because of the kinds of properties, the property bookers, guests that we work with. And so when your calendar is closed because of your software or because you haven't built out rates in the future, when guests search, they can't book your property. And I've seen this happen with property managers that even have, calendars out only 6 months or 7 months. And I get it. Some of you are in markets where you can't set those rates without talking to your owners. But you are missing bookings because people are looking, much beyond 6 months, 7 months. They are actually looking, in some cases for a year. So make sure you've got your rates set out there. And then secondly here, maximize your distribution strategy. We still see quite a few property managers that are essentially putting all their eggs in one basket with one online travel agency. And that's really a mistake because each of us are doing something different. We're attracting different types of travelers. We have a different booking process. We have different marketing methods. The best you can do is advertise with all of us to maximize your opportunity and protect yourself in case someone or some vendor does something that does something that you don't like, or in the case of Airbnb, for example, during COVID, refunding all guests. I mean, that's impactful as a property manager. And so if you've got a diverse set of distribution partners, you can eliminate some of that risk. And so certainly working with HomeToGo is a good idea when we talk about that. All right. So that's it for me. Now we're going to turn it over to Taylor, and she's going to dive into some of the actual data and talk to us about some of the trends that Key Data has been seeing. And I will, before I turn it over to Taylor, I will just throw in my 2 cents about Key Data. If you have not worked with these guys or are not working with these guys, I highly, highly encourage you to do so. There are a couple of different ways that you can get data in our industry. One is you can attend conferences and webinars like this and hear about it from people like me and Taylor. Another one is you can work with companies that provide you with really good data sets. But essentially they're scraped data sets from sites like Airbnb and Vrbo. And so you're really only seeing a part of the story. The cool thing that Key Data does is they add data from lots of different data sets for the entire data set of a property manager. And so you can not only just see sort of what bookings are happening on sort of travel sites, but also what bookings are happening directly, what bookings are repeat. And that's where Key Data can really help you, maximize your chances of building a great business. So with that, I'll hand it over to Taylor.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for those kind words. And also, I am very guilty of those pop culture trends, booking really fun places based on these shows that I've watched. It's kind of tough to not want to do that when travel is so accessible to people now. I think more than it ever has. Like, you could book those right at your fingertips now. So really great. Yeah, thanks for the introduction about Key Data. Key Data is really excited to be here. Excited to talk about some of what Key Data does. And then, of course, I've got some really great trends, both looking historically at the data and then looking ahead too. Key Data, we directly integrate with about 60 different property management systems in this space, and we aggregate the data daily in nearly real time. So we're able to, give you real-time updates with direct source data, taking out any of those, owner homes or nights to make sure that the data is accurate. They are instantly updated. We do scrape some of the major OTAs as well with our data. In that way, you can kind of see a little bit of both. Like, we want to see that accurate real-time direct data, but then we also at times need to see those trends that come from OTAs as well. So we do provide that in our reporting. For today's reports, I am going to focus mostly on the direct data. So for my agenda here, you can see that we're going to look at both the United States and Europe for a 2022 recap. I think that's really important. We got to go back to where it started to change, the data did, or where, you know, if we want to look ahead, we need to look back first. And then we'll look at what we're seeing for 2023 and get into some booking activity and traveler trends, and then scrape supply and demand as well. So first, looking at the adjusted paid occupancy. If you're unfamiliar with what adjusted paid occupancy is, this does differ from traditional paid occupancy because it takes owner holds and stays into account. So this is a more accurate representation of your data. And Ryan, I'm going to take, there you go. Now you can move your mouse around. I know. I don't know if that was
sorry. Yeah, I think I was pushing on my mouse. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's tough. I love the ability to share that, but that was fun. Okay, so looking at what we see here, we have 3 lines to kind of focus on: 2022, 2021, and 2020. Just seeing how those 3 years paced alongside each other. You can see that the U.S. performed ahead of the previous 2 years in January and February of 2022, and then it underperformed 2021 during the summer and returned to underperforming both years in the remaining half of the year, which, if you have seen this in a lot of your data, what you might be seeing is that you're just kind of getting back on trend with what would have been considered a normal occupancy from the last years. And so that's one of the things that we're talking to a lot of our partners about, is saying, hey, don't worry about this. Like, seeing this big drop can be kind of worrisome, especially if you're one of those property managers that got into the game in 2020 and 2021, and now you're like, what's happening to this occupancy? We're really just seeing those trends get back to what we say is a quote unquote, normal year. So looking at the average daily rate in the United States as well, looking at those last 3 years, we can see that ADR has increased year over year every year, except in December of 2022. So it's down about $10 over 2021, but still up roughly $80 over 2020. And again, if you're unfamiliar with what average daily rate is, it's the unit revenue over nights sold. So this is an accurate measure of the daily rate of properties that are, what they're actually booking at in the market, instead of just looking at what we have them listed at or what competitors listed at in the past. We know these are, true booked rates. We did see nightly rates increase over previous years much more steeply in the beginning half of the year. The U.S. ended 2022 up $28 a night over 2021 and up $85 a night over 2020. I'm confident by the time I'm done giving this presentation, the word 20 is going to just be overwhelming for a lot of us. Okay, so now we'll get into the RevPAR. If you are unfamiliar with RevPAR, another huge indicator, if you ask anyone in this space, what is the top key performance indicator I should be tracking, they're going to tell you RevPAR. So adjusted RevPAR is revenue per available rental night. This is really how we describe it, as an overall indicator of your performance. So this takes occupancy, adjusted paid occupancy in this situation, and ADR into account to really let you see kind of like how you're performing. Has that occupancy, that low occupancy we're seeing, impacted me overall, or because I'm getting higher daily rates, is that okay? And so what we've seen throughout the years, even though we saw nightly rates for most part were higher than previous years, occupancy was down. So RevPAR does change it. Like, they do change quite a bit throughout the year because of that. In Q1 of 2022, RevPAR was higher than the previous 2 years. In Q2 started to dip lower than 2021. And in the second half of the year, RevPAR averaged around $13 a unit lower than in 2021. So if you're not tracking your RevPAR, this is something I think that Key Data does an amazing job of, obviously, with just kind of helping you track a lot of your data in all aspects and making sure that you're looking internally, and that's where RevPAR comes in. Your biggest competition is yourself a year ago, so how am I truly setting my rates to affect my occupancy? All right, so looking at the, average booking window. So again, these last 3 years, average booking window is more, valuable after you've seen these dates passed. And so that's a good thing, looking back at these, so we can see what was that accurate average booking window for the year. In 2021, it started to recover from pandemic lows, up about 1.5 weeks. And then the average booking window in 2022 was only 3 days longer year over year, but was marked higher during Q1. So it was almost about 3 weeks longer in 2021 in comparison. And again, the key at the top can help you kind of decipher these 3 lines, that solid line being 22, and then we have 2 dotted lines, but the larger dotted line is 2020, and then the smaller is 2021. I kind of got mixed up on that one. So looking at the average length of stay next, we can see again kind of how the average length of stay was pretty steady during those summer and fall months, with an increase of 2 days during the winter. So snowbirds in a lot of the United States market do start to play a big part in this. In 2022, it was about 5 days, which was the same in 2021. 2022 or 2020, goodness gracious, did see, of course, longer length of stay during April. Guests were stuck in one place. We expect that. That's why you see that spike there. They were stuck in, and so they had to stay longer. And that's one of those things that we definitely expected to see. So now we'll get into some Europe numbers as well. So back to adjusted paid occupancy. Europe's vacation rental market did not recover as quickly as the US due to obviously extended closures and shelter requirements. However, 2022 did come back with what we'd say some vengeance, right? So we do see that occupancy start to spike in those summer months and kind of catching up there. And average or adjusted paid occupancy did increase about 12% over 2021 and 23% over 2020. All right, so getting into the average daily rate, we can see that in Q1 of 2021, where the rates did struggle, falling between 2020's rates. However, for the remainder of the year, they increased over 2020. And then all of 2022 did see that higher nightly rate than the 2 previous years, with summer months having the largest year-over-year increase. So if this is something, maybe you haven't seen this personally, love to, connect to your property management software, look into your daily rates and see, compared to the market, how that RevPAR is impacting you. You definitely should be getting a higher daily rate for some of your bookings, and you may be missing out on that opportunity. We have seen a lot of travel kind of pick back up for that international, which would be a big reason as to why the United States domestic travel is kind of levering out their occupancy back to what they saw in 2020 or 2019, more previous years, because travel's opening back up all over. I don't have to just go where I can drive. Now I can get back on those long planes and feel comfortable with that. Looking at the adjusted RevPAR in Europe, with increased occupancy and nightly rates, it's not surprising to see that RevPAR has increased drastically in 2022 over the previous 2 years. So RevPAR in Europe last year averaged about $71 over the year, a $28 increase from 2021 and a $46 increase from 2020. And we'll look at the Europe average booking window. The average booking window in Europe is much shorter than the United States, but averaged about a month last year. I definitely would say we could get this out to people waiting to the last minute to book over that last year, to make sure that no new lockdowns were put in, no new procedures or restrictions on their travel. We definitely saw that be shorter than what it was in the United States. They averaged about a week longer than in 2021 and 2 weeks longer than in 2020. So they just kind of continue to get longer as those restrictions kind of kept varying throughout the place. In fact, I remember traveling to Spain last year, and it was 1 week it was like, hey, you have to do this, and then the next week they kind of went back on that, and then they did it again, which is great, and everyone wanted to be safe on things, but those types of variances in the travel and restrictions did impact booking windows and when people wanted to secure those bookings. Looking at the average length of stay here, we can see that it's slightly longer in Europe than in the US by about a day. However, the same trends did occur. Winter stays are still slightly longer than the summer and fall stays throughout the year. All right, so now we'll look ahead. Now we'll get into what's going on for 2023, what we're seeing. Of course, what's happened so far for the year, we'll make sure that that's noted as the final for January. So that adjusted paid occupancy in the US, what we saw for January is final, and then everything ahead of that is on the book. So you will see this indicator in the rest of the reports. Adjusted paid occupancy rates in January of 2023 and 2021 were comparable, about 4% lower than in 2022. So continuing that trend that what we saw at the end of 22, where occupancy is getting to be closer to what we saw in 2020, which if you remember this time in 2020, we still were getting those normal bookings until it was about March that we started to see a big change. Looking at the ADR for the United States, same exact thing. We see the finals for January, but seeing that on the books for what we have for the forward-looking months. Since occupancy was lower in January than over the past 2 years, the slight increase in rates was not enough to pull RevPAR, or I'm reading the wrong thing here. My bad, guys. January 23 rates finished 15 nights higher than last year and $75 a night higher than in 2021. Nightly rates are pacing close to 2022, but ahead of 2021. And the difference, of course, is in the summer months. So you definitely can see that. And as you get closer, if you're looking on the books right now, we might see these rates start to drop a little bit as depending again on their occupancy and RevPAR. Now we'll go over those RevPAR numbers. So since the occupancy was lower, and the increase in rates was not enough to really pull that RevPAR above last year, we started to see that. And that's where it's time to, I would say, start having those discussions about your rates. Like if we're seeing our rates are still, we're thinking like we can still get these higher bookings because people are still interested in that. But if your occupancy is starting to drop, we have to make that decision. Is it time to lower those rates or not? And that's where we have to look at the RevPAR. And since, like I said, occupancy was lower in January, we started to see that in our RevPAR. Revenue per available rental night, of course, is pacing ahead of 2021 by an average of $15, but behind 2022 by $12. So let's make sure that you guys are kind of staying ahead of that. And as you can see on the books for the rest of the year, if you're looking internally or looking at market data, make sure you're kind of keeping track of that. Now we'll get into some European numbers for 2023. We can see that the European occupancy is pacing closer to last year than 2021, but still a little behind from that. It's pacing about 2% behind last year, but 2% ahead of 2021. So that's kind of, I know it's hard. Like I feel like we're still talking about how COVID's impacting bookings, but I think last year at this time, if you guys remember, there was another variant that came out, and it can be overwhelming to be like, we have to stop talking. Maybe think that we need to kind of get past that, but it's still going to impact everything that we're looking at over the last 2 to 3 years. The European ADR nightly rates in January did increase 20 nights over 2022 and $49 a night over 2021. The growth in rates in Europe is outpacing the growth in the US rates right now. All months are pacing ahead of both 2022 and 2021, increasing about $35 a night over last year and $76 a night ahead of 2021. Looking at the adjusted RevPAR now, we can see that in January 2023 was about $6 higher than last year and $23 higher than the year before. RevPAR is pacing well ahead of 2021 and still ahead of 2022, even with a slight year-over-year decrease in occupancy. The rate increases are enough to offset it. So here's kind of like the opposite of what we were talking about with the US data. Because occupancy is lower, we have our rates just at the right amount, where overall we're performing better with that RevPAR. All right, so now we'll get into some of the booking activity and traveler trends that we're seeing for the year so far. So we'll first look at the United States average booking window for the year. So of course, as I talked about before, when we looked at 2022's booking windows are more, once you pass them, once at final, as you see for January, we have at that point concluded all of those last minute stays, including all of the longer stays here too. So the further out you look, the longer the booking windows are going to be. However, booking windows are pacing very closely with last year, only averaging about a day longer. Booking windows in Q1 of 2021 were much shorter because of the increased last minute bookings. And then they're on trend with 2022 and longer than what we are seeing in 2021. The length of stay for the next 6 months is averaging about 7 days, but as shorter last minute stays are booked, will likely end closer to last year's average length of stay, which was about 5 days. They appear longer out here because we do have longer bookings. Those are typically guests that will book further out too. So as you get closer, you have your more last minute, shorter stays that come in that do tend to average out that length of stay. Looking at Europe's booking window, we can see that it's pacing about the same as last year in Q1, so it will decrease as time goes on. 2021's booking windows were pacing about a month longer than this year or last year. This is great to kind of look at to see, like, well, where was I if I had more bookings at this time for further out dates? And that's when you can kind of get ahead and see, like, well, what needs to change to make sure that I can get those bookings to come in. The average length of stay in Europe was pacing shorter than last year and the year prior by almost 2 days and 3 days respectively. So we could see that how they're kind of pacing shorter in the data there. Stays in the next 6 months are projected to stay very level. As you can see, looking at those summer months. So booking sources. So this kind of goes what Brian was talking about, how the dominant players based in the US being Airbnb, Vrbo, like we're familiar with seeing those, but actually direct bookings are still most popular in the United States and do drive the most revenue, but they are decreasing slightly as time goes on. This was really interesting for me to see both, because in the next slide we'll look at Europe as well. But we can see here that Vrbo has stayed pretty steady in the last few years when Airbnb stays have increased. However, even with Airbnb getting about 24% of the bookings in 2022, those stays only brought in 15% of the property manager's revenue. Booking.com has a very small share of the market in the United States. So this, I think, this would be a great opportunity here to screenshot this. This is just so interesting to me to see. You may not have thought that your direct bookings were doing a lot of work for you, but obviously I think we've had so many initiatives in the United States to push those direct bookings too, that we've seen a big change here. But then of course seeing that how Vrbo and Airbnb still kind of dominate that is interesting too. And then in Europe, opposites, right? Like Vrbo, very, very little bookings come from Vrbo in Europe. And this is huge for your guests that you're trying to attract as well, whether they're, if you're trying to attract those international guests because the domestic guests are traveling internationally, you need to make sure that you are on the other channels like HomeToGo, how they can help you get on different channels to make sure that you're really leveraging your actual, possibilities where your guests can come from. And this is really kind of a big testament to that, I'd say, as to where the guests are going to be looking whenever they're going to book for your vacation rental. So it's kind of, if that's who you're targeting right now, it's important to make sure that you're utilizing all the right channels for that. So looking at new net reservations in 2022 over the last 3 years here, we can see that they were higher in 2022 than in 2020 and 2019, but slightly lower than 2021. So this is looking at all of the new reservations minus cancellations that we have for each week of the year. So you can see like that 12th week of the year, looking back 2020, that was definitely when bookings dropped as lockdowns happened. But of course, we've seen about 0.72% increase in net new bookings on that week. And so this is really great to kind of track those new reservations, taking out cancellations, seeing what's happening trend-wise. 2022, a little bit lower than what we saw in 2021 so far. And so you could see kind of like the similar season booking patterns that are happening over 19 and 22 for the spring weeks from week 8 to 15 there. That's the spring season. And those are similar trends, which in 2021, we kind of saw them sporadic. And then of course, 22 as well. And we would expect more than likely the same net new bookings to happen in 2023 during that week. And we'll look at the same chart here in Europe. So net reservations in Europe are still below 2019, but higher than 2020 and 2021. So we've not fully returned to 2019 as far as our net new bookings that came in during those specific timeframes. Now we'll look at some scraped supply and demand data. So looking at the United States OTA supply, looking at Airbnb and Vrbo, we can see that Airbnb supply decreased in Q4, which is pretty typical for seasonal patterns. And this is something that kind of was interesting for me to learn about over the last couple of months as we've seen the supply decrease on Airbnb. Learning about those seasonal patterns is really helpful as a property manager, I would say, because if you're wondering, which software may be saturated at different times in your market, that's really important to make sure you're tracking. Vrbo has less market share, and January supply is lower now than last year from what we're seeing there. So they both have yearly peaks in September of 2022. So I had our data analyst help me out with this, and she put this together to kind of really to help explain what we're going to talk about in the next slide. So we're going to discuss how supply and demand and how it's impacting occupancy rates overall. In this first slide here, we're looking at the United States Airbnb only. Your baseline is going to be 2021. This is, of course, looking back at that data so we can see the number of book nights on Airbnb, how they remained higher than 2021 all the way through November. So lower occupancy was not caused by lower demand is one of the things that she wanted us to kind of focus on in this report here. We can see now we're looking at our active nights and the demand nights. Supply has increased dramatically year over year, and we could see that through each month. In many months, the change in supply was larger than the change in demand. And so that's how now we've added this in, and then the next slide, we're going to add in occupancy percentage. So when supply does grow faster than demand, the occupancy drops. So we started to see the supply and how that is. Demand is still there. That's not what's impacting the occupancy. The supply is. And I think a lot of people have had these conversations and we're aware of that. And I think that's where it comes to us having to really, I'll go ahead and get into this key takeaways here. Like the supply increase is contributing to our lower occupancy rate. So the success from what we saw in 2021 is you've got to put your hands back on the wheels, use your resources, work with other providers, get your properties listed on other channels, and make sure you're keeping an eye on the data and adjust all of those market strategies. Like people are traveling, we know that they are, we see the demand, but make sure that they're coming to you. Make sure that if you're doing any campaigns or special things, you're getting them out to the right people. There's a lot of resources that can help with that, key data being a huge resource for that as well. And so we're happy to make sure that we can show you what's going on, who's coming to you in each of your markets as well. But thank you very much. My name is Taylor Berry again. If you have any questions about the key data reports, please email me at taylor@keydata-dashboard.com. I'm happy to share this slide. I think we'll be sending out an email with a recording from the webinar and then the slide deck as well. So I really appreciate that. I guess I can check the question box here too.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. So we've got a couple questions. One from Lisa, and she mentions, can you speak about inventory changes, i.e. we're seeing as much as a 30% increase in inventory. Will demand be able to absorb this increase from your perspective? I think, Taylor, you mentioned that just at the closing there with regards to Airbnb. Obviously, the answer to this really depends on your destination. Are you in a resort area? Are you in a city? How limited is the inventory in your market? When you talk about, adding on new properties, are these properties that were existing in the market already and being booked, and now you're just managing them separately from somebody else? Or are they brand new properties that maybe just got built and have been added? So I don't know if there's anything else you can tease out there, Taylor, on are we seeing,
I'd say it's definitely really dependent on your market, and I would really love to talk.
Lisa mentioned 30A, so you might know that market.
Lisa, I will see you tomorrow, so we can actually chat tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely dependent on your market. 30A, we've seen, I think, more being over here in the Panhandle myself too, we're seeing a lot of property managers kind of get in the game where people decide to start property management companies. That was one of those things. I feel like maybe 5 years ago, we'd look at it and say like, I don't know how easy it is for a property management company to get in the game. But then 2020 success and 2021 success made it a little bit easier for them to get in and just list their properties and automatically have bookings and then occupancy start to fill up. And so I think in 30A particularly, we've seen new builds, but we've also just seen people decide to put their properties on programs now or list them out themselves that we didn't see in the past because they didn't see or even know about the success of the vacation rental industry until that point.
Yeah, and I can imagine even in a market like 38, which is in the panhandle of Florida, a lot of people during COVID deciding to stay in their rental, instead of, staying in Atlanta where their primary house is or wherever. And then, sort of after a while, as many of us have done, said, boy, it's pretty nice to live in this area. Why don't we just move here permanently and maybe start a business? Hey, we could rent out vacation rentals.
Oh, yeah.
So that tends to happen. I mean, I don't know, we still see a good deal of demand. And even at my time at Vrbo, we sort of, I can't remember what our exact saying was, but, there's always room for the right properties at the right times. I think Airbnb and Vrbo right now, as an example, aren't struggling with adding new properties. They're struggling with adding the right new properties that actually book. So if you're talking about a vacation rental that sort of is, super similar to lots of other vacation rentals and doesn't offer anything special and, isn't really booked a lot, then maybe, yeah, you're probably going to run into some inventory things. But boy, in those right times of the year, so 30A, I'm sure it's anytime the kids are out of school and then some snowbird time. But the market is still hungry for the right kinds of properties. And those properties will get booked. I mean, we still see a large amount of compression when it comes to those times when people are looking and they just can't find anything. And they look and they look. And yeah, sure, you can go on websites and find availability, but it's not the properties that, people are looking for. So it really depends. Yeah. We've got another question here from Bob, and Bob, I won't read the exact question. Maybe you guys can all see it, but Bob had some questions about this, sort of the specifics around what key data can offer in terms of sort of micro, like, how far can key data really go into, a market like 30A to really show a property manager what's happening in an exact market. I think those are questions that, Taylor, you can answer sort of independently. And so if anybody has any questions about that or wants to get more information on how they can work with key data or HomeToGo, feel free to reach out to us independently, and we can help.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can definitely map down to the specifics for you, Bob. I'd love to talk to you about that one too.
Yeah. Here's another good question. Do you have any trends on the number of bedrooms? Kitty Lynch asks. Do we have trends? Yeah.
Yeah, we have that.
You guys have it all, I'm sure. Yeah.
We do have it, Katie. I'd love to, like I said, just like Brian pointed out, like emailing us one-on-one so we can kind of see, like, if you want to know trends of number of bedrooms in certain areas, we do have that in a lot of our reports focused on supply that's happening in your market.
Yeah, that's probably a really good data point where you have to really get into the local market, right? Because if you just sort of look globally at 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, you might not be seeing the forest for the trees. But I imagine if you get into a local market, you guys can really tease out some interesting data points around, hey, 3 bedrooms are doing great, 2 bedrooms aren't.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. And as far as like increase in the supply too, like what's happening, it looks like, oh, there's a lot of 4 bedrooms going on, but you're thinking about bringing in that 2 bedroom. There could be very high demand for that too. So definitely.
Yeah. Here's one for me. Let's see. Hillary asked, I have a question about listing on HomeToGo. I've noticed that several of our properties are already listed on it through Vrbo. Once you click on the listing, though, it takes you over to Vrbo. Is there an added benefit to listing with HomeToGo separately? Yes, great question and perfect for me. Yes, there are big benefits for listing directly. One, you can control your listing on our website. Number 2, you basically get positioned higher than other folks that don't list directly. So just as background, we do show properties from Vrbo and a number of different online travel providers. and that was part of our meta sort of search. Beginnings when we started in 2014, our idea at that point was to sort of combine all of these listings from all these different websites into one source. But we found that pretty quickly people wanted to list directly. They wanted more control. They wanted to, be able to see those listings, those bookings in their software, as opposed to, oh yeah, this came from Vrbo, when you really don't know. So many of us do onward distribute properties. I know Vrbo does to sites like Expedia and other places like ours. But as a property manager, it really does benefit you from listing directly. And when you do, then we take down your sort of redirected listing to Vrbo and replace it with your direct listing, so guests can book directly with you. Helps conversion too. We get a lot higher conversion from guests that are doing that rather than bouncing over to a different website. Cool. All right. Well, we've got a couple minutes left, so that's nice. We didn't go over. But if anybody has any questions afterwards, Taylor and I would love to hear from you. So feel free to look us up on LinkedIn, email us through the presentation, contact us that way, or give us a shout at one of these trade shows coming up. We'd love to work with you and provide you with even more data and great information to help grow your business.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. And I look forward to talking to you again later.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.